Today, the bank puppet masters pull the government strings again. And again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, latest posts covering finance and properties with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, the AFR reports that banks have forced the Albanese government to put off the vote on a bill to lift accountability in financial services, with Labor now rethinking a last-minute deal with the Greens that would have added million-dollar fines for law-breaking financial services executives. The banks, led by former Queensland Labor Premier Anna Bligh, warn the move to put individual fines back into the Financial Accountability Regime, the FAR, would have unintended consequences for lenders. The government was expected to fast-track several pieces of outstanding legislation relating to the Hayne Royal Commission on Friday, including a modified version of the FAR, which included a Greens amendment for $1.1 million fines. Superannuation fund and life insurance executives would also have been caught up in the tougher laws and joined the banks in calling for the government to put such significant changes to the bill, which had already been agreed to by both major political parties, to consultation. The government has not ruled out maintaining the fines in the FAR, but will not proceed with a vote on the bill on Friday as planned, after pledging to the Greens that it would include fines in the law to win the party's support for passing a package of other laws without debate in the Senate. The legislation would have also enacted payday lending law changes and a compensation scheme for victims of financial fraud. Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones confirmed to the AFR that he dumped plans to pass the suite of long-delayed legislation after concerns among industry. We'll be consulting broadly about what we need to do to resolve the outstanding Hayne matters, including the FAR and compensation scheme of last resort, Mr Jones said. The Greens have made it clear they won't support the bill without those amendments in relation to the FAR, so we'll just pull the bill. Mr Jones spoke with Australian Banking Association Chief Executive Anna Bligh on Thursday afternoon after she requested an urgent call. He confirmed Labor would pull the bill and consult on the inclusion of fines. Ms Bligh told the Australian Financial Review that the ABA understands the government is more closely considering the bill and would welcome further discussions on its detail. Banks said Labor considerations of fines came as a surprise, with an apparent exercise in horse trading seemingly at odds with the government's assurances it will not shock big business with surprises. Some lenders were concerned fines could make it more difficult to hire senior executives and may increase risk aversion, with banks still finding their feet after the Hayne Royal Commission, as individual executives seek to avoid running foul of the tougher laws. The Financial Services Council, which was also involved in the discussions on Thursday, urged the government not to add the fines without a consultation process, given it was complex legislation. The Australian Banking Association had lobbied against individual penalties being included in the regime for several years. The Hayne Royal Commission called for the extension of FAR, but did not recommend that individual fines be part of it. The fines were used as a bargaining chip by the Greens in negotiations with the government over what legislation could be fast-tracked for debate in Parliament's final sitting fortnight. The Hours motion, which was opposed by the Coalition, allows the Senate to vote on 24 bills without debate at 2 p.m. on Friday. The Greens' support for including the FAR in the fast-track list was conditional on the inclusion of fines. Greens Treasury spokesman Nick McKim slammed Mr Jones' backflip on financial penalties. This is a disgraceful move from the minister, who's reneged on a clear agreement that we shook hands on in his office. If the minister says there was no deal, he is not fit to be a minister, Senator McKim said. The minister has clearly cracked under pressure from the big banks. Reneging on the agreement shows that he values the interests of bank executives over bank consumers. The Morrison government had considered levying individual fines worth up to $1.05 million for law-breaking executives in the FAR, but the penalties were later removed from the legislation after intense lobbying from the banks, as revealed previously in the AFR. Although Mr Jones backed financial penalties when Labor was in opposition, the Albanese government never included them in its FAR legislation. After the Senate Standing Committee on Economics reported on the bill in late October, Green senators said the penalties in the FAR are not strong enough, describing them as all carrot no stick. The whole premise of the regime is that firms and the individuals who run them not only need to avoid engaging in deliberate misconduct, for which there are existing laws and punishment, but also need to establish risk and governance cultures that seek to avoid misconduct as well, Senator McKim wrote in additional comments to the report. Consumer groups also made a push for the government to reconsider penalties, arguing in an October submission that removing personal liability meant the law would not deter senior bankers from engaging in misconduct. One banking industry source said although the reappearance of fines was a surprise, penalties on individuals would not change banks' desire to avoid breaching the FAR, which had been the focus of extensive compliance programs since the Hayne Royal Commission. The reputational and regulatory fails under the BEAR, the Banking Executive Accountability Regime, are still the same, and no one wants to fall foul of that, notwithstanding this more public penalty, the bankers said. It is not clear whether banks, superannuation funds and insurers would be able to cover executives for the cost of potential fines, or whether they would be covered by company insurance policies. Legislation will also enact the Compensation Scheme of Last Resort, the CSLR, a recommendation of both the Ramsey Review in 2017 and the Hayne Royal Commission in 2019. The CSLR tries to protect people who cannot seek financial redress when the firm that wronged them has collapsed. The Morrison government supported the recommendation, but never put the legislation forward for a vote in Parliament. The proposed compensation scheme covers 5 defined financial products and services, including financial advisors and mortgage brokers, but leaves out other products such as managed investment schemes and funeral insurance. The Australian Financial Complaints Authority put a hold on dealing with complaints involving insolvent firms in April 2020 because it was waiting for the compensation scheme to pass Parliament. There were 1,964 complaints worth almost $365 million in limbo as at February 2022, according to information provided by AFCA in February to the Senate Standing Committee on Economics. About 244 complaints worth a little over $50 million are likely to be covered by the compensation scheme under the proposed design. The third element of the legislation is new payday lending laws. Under the new rules, there will be a 10% cap on the proportion of an individual's income that can pay off a payday loan. Tighter rules around payday lending have been on the cards since 2017, when the Turnbull government proposed to tighten rules around small credit contracts. The legislation was subsequently watered down and rolled into the Morrison government's controversial package to repeal responsible lending laws. So you can see here again, the banks are exerting huge pressure on the government, and the government chooses to fold and break promises that it made to the Greens. The fact is, banks rule the roost. They are the puppet masters, and frankly, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.